A very wise Jedi Master once said, "Do or do not, there is no try." And that's why in 2026 I am not trying to go through the entirety of the Star Wars canon. I am going to do it. I'm sure that there is a less chunky way to word that, but we have about 130 tries at that, so I'm sure I'll figure it out eventually. Welcome to whatever this is. I honestly am not sure myself. I have never once attempted to do an audio format like this, so hopefully everything sounds okay, and hopefully you guys like this format. Yeah, this is what I have been envisioning doing for this project, because I have experienced all of this before, this being the entirety of the Star Wars canon in one way or another. I feel like what better time than to catalog my thoughts and feelings than right now when I'm doing it all at once, and I have the forefrontal knowledge to compare and contrast all these things as we go through, and I'm not waiting like months or years in between watching all of these things. Almost 2 minutes into this, I feel like it's a fantastic time to introduce myself in case this is the first time you are hearing my voice. My name is Sunny. I am on social media at twin.sunns with 2 N's. And I, for the past 3-ish years, have been posting about my general love of Star Wars, and last year that morphed into me reading every single canon novel that has been released up until the end of 2025, which is absolutely insane. It's over 100 books, and just absolutely crazy that I was able to do that in a year. That's not what this is about, though. After the audacity of me putting that out onto the internet, and then me subsequently being able to complete that audacious thought, I figured let's do something crazier, which in my mind is going through everything again and then adding more media onto it with all of the movies, all of the live action series, all of the animated series, all of the shorts, all of the games that I can get my hands on and have the ability to actively play, and mush it all together and see if I can get through it within a year, or at the very least, if I can't, see how long it will actually take me and commit to doing this thing that I wanted to do basically since I re-entered the Star Wars space. I got into Star Wars around 2015, 2016 when The Force Awakens and Rogue One were being released. Before that, I had watched the original trilogy. I don't think I'd watched the prequels up until that point. And when I was a child, they never really interested me, but after The Force Awakens, and specifically really after Rogue One, I just couldn't get enough of it. So that's the mission statement. That's me. That's what we're going to try to do. And I think the best way to do this is to each episode go through what I read, give a little bit of the metadata, talk about the authors and when this was released and all of that good stuff, and then get into a little summary of whatever media we're discussing, and then we can talk about thoughts and feelings. So, with the preamble out of the way, I promise we won't have to go through that every single episode. We can start at the very beginning. The first thing on this journey is the first book of Phase 2 of the High Republic, which is Path of Deceit. This book is co-written by Tessa Gratton and Justina Ireland. The audiobook is narrated by Erin Yvette, who I think did an amazing job with this book. The cover artist is Corey Brickley. I believe I'm pronouncing that name correctly, hopefully. This is absolutely one of my favorite Star Wars book covers. It is so beautiful and detailed. This book was published by Disney Lucasfilm Press and was released on October 4th, 2022. The runtime for the audiobook, in case you're interested, is 8 hours and 10 minutes, but of course I am a crazy person and listen to these on 2x speed, so it took me just about 4 hours to get through, which I know is crazy. And here's where we can start getting into the canon discussion and summary. This is your final spoiler warning. If you're looking to avoid spoilers for this book, specifically if you haven't read it yet, highly suggest maybe not listening to this or for most of the series, just because I am going to be giving in detail summaries of all of these things. So if you're the type of person that wants to avoid any information before they go into any sort of media, maybe check out my TikTok instead, because that will be a little bit less spoilery. We pick up with this book in 382 BBY, which for those unfamiliar means before the Battle of Yavin, with a character that maybe you wouldn't be expecting, someone who's not super consequential at the moment, Radicus Sunshine Dobbs. We see Sunshine land his pleasure yacht called the Scupper in the settlement of Ferelden. Every single time I read this, I read Ferelden because I am a huge Dragon Age fan. It's Ferden, Ferdan. But I mean, my brain sees the F and the D and automatically locks on to that being Ferelden. So if I say that again, apologies. He lands on the settlement Ferden on the planet Dalna, where he is basically immediately greeted by another character, the Herald, whose name is Worth Ploth. I'm just going to be referring to him as the Herald because that's basically all we ever read him as in this book. He is a member of the cult called the Path of the Open Hand. The Herald takes Dobbs to the Path's compound where he meets the cult's leader, Alicia Zevron, referred to as the Mother. Dobbs has been hired by the Path to collect artifacts connected to the Force as a part of their goal to quote-unquote liberate the Force and the artifacts that are connected to it. The Mother wants Sunshine to steal 3 artifacts known as the Rod of Ages, the Rod of Seasons, and the Rod of Daybreak. While most of the artifacts that Dobbs have brought with him already have been of no interest to the Path and are basically garbage, amongst the garbage, the Mother takes interest in one thing that Sunshine has brought over, and that is a large purple egg that seems to be strong with the Force. Pleased with this, the Mother tells Dobbs that she's willing to work with him. I think it's worth noting that during this interaction and with all subsequent interactions between the Mother and Sunshine, it feels like the Mother has almost cast a spell on him. He seems very wavy, if that makes any sense. He wants whatever she wants, he'll do whatever she wants to do. He doesn't seem fully in control of his actions. We then jump over to another world, an outer rim frontier planet called Tike, where we meet Jedi Padawan Kevmo Zink and a couple other Jedi, including his master Zala Macri, Macri, also Jedi Knight Aslan Rel, and his droid C9. They are trying to divert a herd of grass sharks away from a settlement. And I just have to say here, I love the concept of a grass shark. I'm envisioning Jeff the land shark just going through grass. I'm sure that's not what they actually look like, but in my mind theater, that is exactly what's happening. Since the sharks use the planet's magnetic field to guide their migration path, C9 and Rel use a kind of complicated system of configuring comms, beacons, and things like that to divert their path. So that goes off semi without a hitch, and later, after they're done with that, the Jedi receive news that the Rod of Seasons has been stolen from the Hyacintian Queen, who had requested the Jedi's assistance in getting it back. Since the group was close to Hynestia, Master Zala decides to lead the response and take Kevmo to go look for said lost rod. Back on Dalna, we meet 2 more Path cultists, one named Marta Rowe, the other named Dreslin, as they are going to assist a Kesrian mother named Faeries, as she has 6 hatchlings who are emerging from their eggs in a complex underneath the Path's compound. After the hatching has been completed, Marta is joined by her cousin, Yana Rowe, who, by the way, are both Evereni, a species that we have not seen a lot in Star Wars. The 2 discuss the Path of the Open Hand's practice of quote-unquote liberating Force artifacts, and we learn that while Marta believes that they're liberating the artifacts from those who seek to abuse it, Yana thinks that they're probably just stealing them for their own gain. The 2 break off for a little bit, and Marta heads to where the Mother and some of the elders of the Path are located. She volunteers to accompany the Mother on a missionary trip with who the Mother refers to as her children, which is kind of like the upper echelon of the people who aren't elders within the Path. It's just like her group of people who she has go and do stuff and trusts a little bit more than just a regular old Path member. The Mother tells Marta that she doesn't need her to go do this, and Marta's a little bit disappointed by that and is comforted by the elders. We then jump over to Yana, who is visiting a person named Sensei's work hut, which serves as the Path's communication center. As she meets with Sensei, her girlfriend named Corpluth, who is the daughter of the Herald, and another Path member named Trees. They discuss a plan to steal a Force dagger from a Republic storage locker in Port Hayleap. The dagger is said to be capable of cutting someone off from the living Force. A bit later, we cut back to Kevmo and his master as they arrive in Ferrodin on a skiff. After landing at a spaceport, Kevmo heads over to the marketplace to acquire some supplies, and in that market, he encounters Marta and 9 Path children known as Littles. They're giving away flowers and promoting their faith at a little table booth thing in the middle of the market, and Kevmo kind of makes a beeline for them, basically immediately. At this point, we see that Kevmo is already a little bit suspicious of the Path members, believing that they could have been responsible for the Hynestian Rod heist. He nevertheless goes and tries to befriend the group and starts a conversation with Marta and the Littles about the Force. Kevmo and Marta are almost immediately physically attracted to one another, but for the time being, they stick to vague flirting. After talking for a second, Marta gets one of the Littles named Simi to give Kevmo a river rose. When Kevmo uses his Force powers to lift the rose, Marta is horrified and tries to shield the children from it. Kevmo is a little bit weirded out by this and doesn't really understand what he did wrong, and this prompts Marta to engage in a theoretical debate with Kevmo, arguing that the Force isn't a tool to be used and that using it could upset its balance. Kevmo disagrees because obviously that's not what the Jedi are taught, and they argue for a little bit about how using the Force is a natural gift, and by using it you're not doing any innate harm. There's no balance to be thrown off in that way. They don't really come to a satisfying conclusion in this debate, but we do learn that Marta believes that the Jedi are trying to control the Force and bend it to their own will, and of course Kevmo tries to dispute that, but it doesn't really land with her. This argument ultimately ends with Marta ushering the children away from the marketplace and kind of just leaving Kevmo there to go about his business. Jumping back over to Yana, she is accompanied by fellow children of the Open Hand, which again is the mother's inner circle. She's with Kor, her girlfriend, Trees, and Cincy aboard a ship called the Harmony at Port Hayleap. After they land, Trees distracts and then kills the dockmaster while Yana uses her slicing skills to unlock the door to a warehouse for confiscated goods. They retrieve the Force-sensitive object that we learn is from Moraband that is inside of this warehouse. The group then returns to the Harmony. They fly back to Dalna after that. During this string of events, we learn that Yana is aware that her girlfriend Kor has some sort of Force sensitivity, but that instead of her being sent away, which is customary for most Path children who are learned to be Force sensitive, her father decided to keep her on Ferrodin. Meanwhile, Master Zala has found accommodations with an elderly lodge owner in the area named Lady Jara. Kevmo arrives and relays his encounter with the Path of the Open Hand to his master, and while Zala disagrees with the Path's claims that the Jedi are misusing the Force, obviously, she explains that the Jedi have served and communed with the Force for millennia, and they haven't been found to do anything wrong or anything in terms of unbalancing the Force. Zala tells Kevmo that Jara is wary of the Path, Jara again being this lodge owner, and she's concerned that this cult is doing something nefarious on the planet. Zala advises Kevmo to learn more about the Path and meditate on whether or not he should attempt to make amends with Marta, who he told his master that he upset. A little bit later, we meet back up with Marta, who is taking place in a naming ceremony for 5 of the recent Caesarian hatchlings. It's at this moment that the authors took the time to establish some things about Caesarian culture, which I feel like aren't really important enough to get into here, but we do get into a little bit about how gender works for that species, which I guess was fun, but ultimately doesn't really mean anything. But also during this chunk of the book, we see that the mother is presiding over the ceremony, and she sings a song that explains how the Path's founder, Sakar Rold, a former priest of the Guardian of the Wills, of all things, came to Dalna and established the Path of the Open Hand. The mother tells a story about coming to Dalna as a refugee and then joining the Path, and she later claims to have experienced a spiritual encounter with a being of pure Force energy who taught her how to be in harmony with the Force. After the ceremony, Marta goes to find her cousin Yana, and Yana confesses that she has been experiencing some real doubts about the mother's teachings, and in return, Marta tells Yana about her encounter with Kevmo. This whole scene is really just planting the seeds for conversations that we're going to get a couple more times throughout this book. Marta talks a lot about Kevmo in this scene, and she explains that while she was repulsed by his quote-unquote misuse of the Force right in front of her, she confides in Yana that she's still kind of infatuated with Kevmo and knows that he was actively flirting with her. Yana tells her cousin that she believes that the Jedi are on Dalna for espionage reasons and doesn't trust them at all. Following this conversation, Yana suggests that Marta should invite Kevmo to the Path's compound and show him the way that they operate in an attempt to kind of turn him to their side. Marta is down for this idea, and she basically immediately goes over to the Jedi's lodging and invites Kevmo to come visit, which he and his master accept. A little bit later, we are back with Yana, who is briefing the mother about their successful operation to steal the Force dagger. She tells the mother also about Marta's encounter with Kevmo, and while the Herald objects to Yana's idea of getting Marta to invite the Jedi to the compound, the mother kind of agrees with her and thinks that it's a good opportunity to convince the Jedi that the Path are peaceful and they can leave without digging too deep into anything. Now, during this meeting, Yana and Kor, who is also there, noticed the mother's egg-shaped quote-unquote jewel, which is creating a disturbance in the Force that Kor can sense. Kor tells Yana that she feels really uncomfortable around the jewel and doesn't want to have it anywhere near her mother, whose name is Apari, who is drastically ill and being treated only by the money given by one of the Path's wealthy benefactors that just happened to show up exactly when they needed him. She also expresses that she doesn't feel like she really belongs to the Path. We then jump over to Sunshine Dobbs, who is on Han Talos, meeting with a Republic Pathfinder named Alonzo Santeca. Hold the Santeca name in your heart because they will be popping up for the rest of this experience, not only this book, but basically every other Star Wars thing. The Santecas are everywhere. So we learned that Alonzo has leaked information about a hyperspace route that can take someone to the mysterious planet known as Planet X that lands at the edge of wild space. Santeca sells a data card containing a copy of the route to Sunshine, and in return, Sunshine kills him. Sunshine is able to confirm the authenticity of the route on his ship and then arranges to have Santeca's body thrown off of the ship once he reaches hyperspace. Back with Kevmo, who has been meditating and practicing his lightsaber skills along with his master, still at Lady Jara's guest house by the way, they discuss the purpose of their mission, which is of course to search for the Hyacinthian Rod of Seasons and return it. Zala tells her Padawan not to let his feelings manipulate him and to moderate their use of the Force when around the Path members. Together, they go to the Path compound where Marta gives them a little bit of a tour. She shows them places of interest and explains their way of life and the organizational structure of the Path. They purposefully don't go to a couple places, including the underground caves where the hatchlings were, but Marta gives them the TLDR basically on the entirety of the Path. She does explain some of the Path's buildings and also talks about the underground levels that are for the elderly and young members, which we can assume includes the hatchlings. Marta also shows them the Gaze Electric, keep that name in your mind, which is still undergoing construction but will eventually serve as the Path's mobile interstellar base. When pressed by Kevmo, Marta admits that the Path also stores several Force artifacts there, which they guard securely since they believe that people shouldn't be tempted to use them. While Master Zala goes to meet with the elders, Marta takes Kevmo to go see a sunrise overlooking a nearby river. The two express their feelings during this scene, and I didn't write this down, but I'm pretty sure this is where they first kiss, or technically kiss several times. And Marta also takes this opportunity to once again try to convert Kevmo to the Path. Using a plant in sunlight analogy, Kevmo tries to argue that the Force can be used for good purposes, and there's not really a question on whether or not using the Force will unbalance it and cause something horrible to happen. And Marta kind of rebuts this, saying that that analogy is not very good and that the Path has chosen to live in harmony with the Force rather than try to use it. They kind of brush off this argument once again, and Kevmo changes the subject by asking about the missing artifacts. And Marta, who at this point is unaware of the Path's constant thieving of Force artifacts, says that they only accept artifacts that are quote freely given or quote willed by the Force to be theirs. Following the Jedi's visit, Yana starts to seriously question whether or not she should leave the Force or not. She's leaning towards yes. And as heavy rain begins to fall around the compound, Yana goes to find her cousin, Marta, who turns out to be in a meeting with the mother. They're speaking for a bit about the idea of converting Kevmo to the path, and Mother tells Marta to keep at it. After Marta leaves, Yana discusses the Jedi visitors with the mother and is concerned that the Jedi will eventually discover the hordes of stolen Force artifacts, and Yana and the mother agree that the Jedi could establish an outpost on Dalna that would bring the path's activities under higher level of scrutiny, and they both do not want that. Yana also tells the mother that she's planning on leaving the path, and the mother asks her to reconsider, though doesn't push too much. After leaving the meeting, Yana discovers that water has begun flowing into the caverns, causing the lower levels of the facility to start to flood. And if you remember, that's where all the elderly and children are. We cut back to Marta and Kevmo, who are on their way back to the path's compound, and Marta here is starting to question just a tiny bit about the mother and why she hasn't received Force visions about some recent tragedies that have occurred in and around the path. Kevmo calms her down, and they make it to the compound, where they find several people gathering at a storage barn near the path's communal garden. While most of the elders and the littles have made it back to the surface, they realize quickly that Fairies, their partner Erdal, and 3 of their newborns are still missing. Marta and Kevmo decide to go down into the caves and attempt to rescue them. While heading down to the nesting chamber under the commune, the two pass a narrow corridor marked with some black guide marks. Kevmo quickly asks about those, and Marta kind of brushes it off, saying that they're for the mother's higher-ranking aides and acolytes and servants, and it's not a huge deal. Inside of the flooded cave, they find Fairies and her family near the water basin. Erdal has been trapped behind some loose rocks with all of their hatchlings. They're able to free the family, but only because Kevmo was using the Force. Following the rescue, Kevmo apologizes to Marta, causing her to realize that he did in fact use the Force, and this in turn causes her to rationalize that it was only through the will of the Force that the rescue mission was a success. Now, very roughly, that is the first half of the book, or at least that is what I would refer to as the setup for the book. We are now getting into the end game. We have 5 sections left on my notes, though they're 5 very, very long sections. This is where things start to get a little bit more drastic, and we start getting into that High Republic feel that you would know if you have read Phase 1 and or Phase 3 already. So we meet back up with everyone 3 days after the flood. Yana is meeting with Kor, Sindel, and Trees to discuss their next plan to quote-unquote liberate a Force artifact known as Jedi Tears from the Graf family. Keep this one in your heart as well. Where there is a Santeca, there is almost always a Graf, and they are fighting one another. The Graf family compound is on a planet called Thelj. This is a really hard one for me to pronounce. Thelj. I'm gonna go with Thej because that's easiest for me to pronounce, but I really don't think that is the correct pronunciation. Anyways, Yana tells the group about her doubts in the mother, citing their constant thieving and the sale of artifacts, and the others don't really scare her skepticism and brush this off. We then see Kor go to join her mother and the elders in rehearsing for a harvest dance, while Yana leaves to start restoring some of the lights to the commune. Before she leaves, she tells the herald about her plans to leave Dalna and the path. Meanwhile, we see Sunshine Dobbs has returned to meet with the mother. Though he failed to steal the Rod of Daybreak, he learned that it's on display at a museum in Jeddah. The mother is satisfied with this information and tasks Sunshine with transporting some of her children for another quote-unquote pilgrimage. During this section, we learn that Kevmo has spent the past 3 days helping Marta with some post-disaster relief work around the commune, including preparing some meals and watching over the littles. We see Kevmo tell some stories to the children, which include stories about his childhood on Hosnian Prime before going to join the Jedi, and some stories about the Jedi Temple on Jeddah. Marta seems to be particularly curious about Jeddah, which is conveniently the seat of the Convocation of the Force, which is a collection of various Force-wielding faiths, including the Guardians of the Whills, who you will know from Rogue One. That is what Chirrut was a servant of. This also includes the Jedi, the Sorcerers of Tundand, I believe that's how you pronounce that, and of course the Church of the Force, which we will be hearing more about. After Kevmo leaves the compound, we see a brief scene of him helping some of Lady Jara's workers to lift a damaged trading transport from the mud, and then he heads over to the port to rejoin Master Zala, and during this commute he overhears a conversation between Trees and Riley, 2 members of the Path, about finding a ship to try and travel off-world. This conversation reinforces his suspicion that the path was behind the theft of the Force artifacts, including the rod that they came to look for. After overhearing that convenient bit of information, he meets up with his master, who informs him that their skiff's compressor was damaged during the storm, and importantly for later, she has contacted Port Hayleap to send a new one. Kevmo tells her about his time in the tunnel beneath the Path compound, and Zala tells him that she believes the Path are hiding stolen Force artifacts aboard the Gate's Electric. During this conversation, Kevmo tells his master that Marta is interested in visiting Jedha, and that he has feelings for her. Zala says that it's alright for Kevmo and Marta to have feelings for one another, but reminds him about his teachings and reminds him that he has already committed himself to the way and the teachings of the Jedi and how they view the Force. Later that night, we see Marta meet up with the Herald after going to bathe in a nearby river. They talk for a bit about the Force, and he ultimately reinforces the Path's belief that the Force must be free. The Herald reveals to Marta that her cousin Yana is planning on leaving the Path and asks her to convince Yana to reconsider. This news is so upsetting to Marta because her and her cousin are really, really close. And during this conversation, the Herald confirms that the Path plans to leave Dona once the Gaze Electric is spaceworthy. At Cincy's hut, we see Yana finishing up her reprogramming of the last of the compound's lights, and before she can leave, Marta bursts in and confronts her about her wanting to leave and attempts to convince her to stay with the Path of the Open Hand. It's during this conversation we get to see how much Marta really truly believes in the Force and in the Mother and in the Path. We see that Yana is a bit more of a skeptic, partially due to how harsh her childhood was, being Evereni, a species that is seen almost as a bad omen throughout the galaxy. We also see during this conversation that Yana is a lot more willing to question the Mother, and she tells Marta that the Path's teachings are not the end-all be-all within the galaxy, and that the Mother is not all-knowing. After that scene, we cut back to Master Zala and Kevmo, who are still waiting for their skiff to be repaired, and while they're waiting, they're discussing their plans to continue their search for the Rod of Seasons, which they now fully believe has been stolen by the Path of the Open Hand. Kevmo is super eager to go in and just recover the stolen artifact, guns blazing, and his master advises him that in this circumstance it would be better to be cautious and wait for the Path to make a mistake. We have a little bit of a time skip to later that day where Kevmo meets up with an extremely upset Marta, who tells him about Yana's plan to leave the Path. She is basically unconsolable, so to try to calm her down, Kevmo offers to buy them both ice cream so they can sit down and discuss. Marta agrees, and after calming herself a little bit, she starts to question why a higher-ranking believer like Yana would be wanting to leave the Path and, in her eyes, kind of betray the Mother. And Kevmo in this moment offers that there may be more of a personal reason to why Yana wants to leave the Path. Towards the end of this conversation, Kevmo invites Marta to attend the convocation as a part of an interfaith experience, and Marta agrees, so Kevmo says that he'll ask his master for permission for her to come along. I do think that this was a little bit funny on his part, fully offering to bring her to Jedha before getting the approval of his master. After that conversation, we go with Marta as she visits the Mother's cottage. She goes in and finds that the Mother is in a meeting with the Herald and two of the elders, one of which being Aris Aid and the other being named Delwyn. Marta informs the Path's leadership that she was unable to persuade Yana not to leave the Path, and then seeks permission to go to Jedha in order to establish the Path there, citing that the convocation doesn't have any sort of representation for the Path. The Herald seems pretty supportive of this idea for Marta to go to Jedha, but the Mother insists on sticking to their initial plan of waiting until the Gaze Electric is done being built and then going to travel the galaxy aboard it. And since the Mother has the final say in these things, Marta's proposal is declined. The Mother says something really interesting here. She says, "I do not want the Path on Jedha at this time." And that use of the word "I" causes Marta to start to question not only the Mother, but the Path's teachings and her connection with the Force. Because she said, "I do not want this," instead of "we do not want this," or "the Force does not want this," like she usually would. Marta extracts that to mean that it is the Mother truly who does not want this to happen, and that is not necessarily the will of the Force. She does kind of brush this thought off, but I think that this really stays with her in the back of her mind as the book continues. We then jump back over to check in with Yana, who is with the other children about to depart on Sunshine's ship. They are, of course, heading for the Graf family compound, compound on the ice planet of Theej. As they get up into space, we see that Sunshine is able to use a private hyperspace route, which I think the idea of that is just kind of insane. During this journey, Kor confronts Yana a little bit. Yana tells her that while she just generally doesn't really want to be there anymore, she thinks that the Jedi are eventually going to discover all of the stolen artifacts on Donna, but Kor still really trusts the mother and believes in the path and thinks that the Force will protect them. After arriving at the Graf compound, the path members masquerade as pilgrims seeking respite from the cold, invoking what is known as the rite of hospitality on that planet. They are begrudgingly let into the compound, and after hiding in the bathroom, Yana hacks into the Graf compound's computer system. Things start to go wrong very quickly here, and Therese and Kor almost immediately get into a fight with the Graf family's private security guards. That is so difficult for me to say. Yana kills one of the human housekeepers and another security guard, while Therese stabs a Dura security guard in the chest. During the fight, Kor is mortally wounded by a blaster wound to her waist. With the Graf family's security now alerted to their presence beyond them just being pilgrims, the children are forced to abort their mission. Therese thinks that they could have been betrayed by someone on the path, but before they can leave, he's stabbed in the neck by the Duros guard they previously thought was incapacitated. Yana blasts that guard, killing him before taking Kor and exiting the building. Kor isn't able to make it back to Sunshine's ship and succumbs to her injuries, but in her final moments expresses her love for Yana. At this point, obviously, Yana is absolutely distraught and is forced to leave Kor's body behind as security guards start to converge on her position. She makes it back to the scupper and accuses Sunshine and the mother of betraying them. Sunshine denies his involvement, but offers to take Yana back to Donna to settle things with the mother. And that's where we leave that for the time being. Like I said, this is where things really start to heat up. Back with Kevmo and his master, who are at the moment practicing some lightsaber combat, Marta shows up and tells them that she would be unable to accompany them to Jedha at the moment. She claims that she's not yet ready to leave Donna. She thanks the two Jedi for giving her a sense of clarity and for saving her fellow path members, and then, alone with Kevmo, they talk for a bit and ultimately decide to abandon their romance after Kevmo explains that that's not really something Jedi are able to do, and they decide to remain friends. That evening, we watch as Kevmo hides near the flood-damaged port office and waits for the path's ship to return. Marta, during their alone time, had told him that Yana and some of the other children had gone off-world, causing him to want to investigate further. He watches Yana arrive along with Sunshine Dobbs, who he immediately recognizes as a wanted criminal implicated in a variety of crimes, including the suspected murder of the Republic official Alonzo Santeca. Kevmo returns to his master and tells her what he saw, and she almost immediately decides that their investigation of the past compound needs to happen that night. We then cut over to Marta, who has met up with an upset and frankly murderous Yana outside of the past compound. Yana tells her cousin that Kor and Therese are dead and that she thinks the mother sent them there on purpose to die. She also questions whether or not the mother has ever even experienced a Force vision and tells Marta that she is going to kill the mother. Marta is able to temporarily calm her cousin down, and the two go to eat and get cleaned up a little bit. While eating, Yana gives Marta the full rundown on what happened, or what she believes happened, that the mother sent the team to Theej to steal a Force artifact from the Graf compound, but they walked into a trap which resulted in the deaths of their two friends. She also reiterates that she believes the mother wanted to kill them, and thinks that that was the case because the children were starting to ask too many questions. Marta convinces Yana to go speak with Kor's parents and agrees to leave the path with Yana after she has spoken to the Herald and to the mother, saying that Kevmo will help them get off-world. This is the beginning of the end. Yana enters the mother's cottage, where she's confronted by Master Zala and Kevmo, who have discovered the mother's stolen stash of Force artifacts, including the Rod of Seasons, which they've been looking for the entirety of the book. Yana accuses the Jedi of trespassing, and after they're joined by the mother and the Herald, the mother gives the Jedi one opportunity to leave with the Rod of Seasons. Master Zala declines this. She wants to arrest the mother for stealing Force artifacts. The Herald has his retainers open fire on the Jedi, but the two are able to easily deflect the blaster bolts with their lightsabers. This causes the mother to go to her final resort, breaking her purple jewel, which is revealed to be an egg containing what we know at the moment is referred to as the Great Leveler, or just the Leveler. The Leveler manifests as this kind of blob of blue, iridescent, fleshy nothingness, and it clings on to Master Zala and basically immediately turns her to stone. It then turns its attention to Kevmo and lunges for an attack. Kevmo attempts to defend himself with the force, but the creature wraps its tendrils around his ankle. Kevmo descends into a state of fear before breaking free of the creature and fleeing from the room. Having consumed the living force of his victims, the leveler grows into a four-legged animal resembling a tuca cat, which, for those who are unfamiliar, kind of looks like a loth cat. The mother proclaims in this moment that the leveler's attacks on the Jedi were a sign that the Force will protect them. Kevmo flees the cavern in a state of absolute panic and fear, unable to feel the Force because of the leveler's attack. He's completely cut off. As he runs, his body is slowly turning to stone. In this highest moment of tension, we quickly cut back to Marta, who's packing her clothes and applying a new layer of brickle shell paint onto her face. We watch her say goodbye to Feyres and her family, and Marta tells them that while she's going off-world with Yana, she won't be leaving the path. While giving the family one last hug, she hears an unusual noise from the tunnels. Her, along with the Kestrine family, go into the tunnel where they find Kevmo in pain and dying. Kevmo is struggling to speak, but uses his last moments to tell Marta that he was attacked by the mother. In that moment, Marta notices that Kevmo smells like chalk and that gray stony scales have spread all over his body. Kevmo stops breathing, and before leaving his stone form, Marta takes his lightsaber. Meanwhile, Yana tells the Herald about his daughter's fate on Thij and how she believes the mother is responsible. Yana once again proposes killing the mother before more Jedi arrive, but the Herald dismisses the Jedi as a threat because they now have the leveler. Still, Yana wants to confront the mother for causing the death of her girlfriend, but again, the Herald stops her, telling her that it's not the time. We then jump back to the mother, who is in a meeting with the elders, introducing them to the leveler, claiming that she saw the creature in a Force vision. Sunshine tells the crowd that there are more creatures similar to the leveler on the uncharted planet in wild space, Planet X. The Herald tells the other elders that they will soon depart on the Gaze Electric, which is now spaceworthy. While the Herald and the mother speak, Yana realizes that the leveler has snuggled up to her because she's holding the Rod of Seasons. The Herald, who Yana senses is now going for a power grab against the mother, claims that the leveler has chosen Yana as its champion. Sensing that the Herald is plotting something, Yana feigns submission and says that she will humbly accept the leveler and will become their chosen champion. Marta soon arrives to the crowd with Kevmo's lightsaber in her hand and confirms the Padawan's death. In that moment, Marta rationalizes that the leveler killed the Jedi because they abused the Force. This, in her mind, was restoring balance to the Force and causes her to say that they have to stop the other Jedi. Her words are echoed by the others, and the mother appoints Marta as a guide who will work alongside Yana, the leveler's champion. In this scene, Marta's final thought is of taking the path and the leveler to the convocation on Jedha, which, if you'll remember, is a meeting between a ton of other Force religions, including the Jedi. Several days later, aboard the now spacefaring Gaze Electric, Sunshine meets with the mother in her private quarters. He confirms that the Jedi have another Force artifact on Jedha, the Rod of Daybreak, in a heavily guarded vault. The mother sends Sunshine to Jedha to prepare for the rest of the path's arrival and instructs him to, quote, make the path's presence known, end quote. Meanwhile, we see Yana, who is meeting with the Herald in private to discuss her relationship with Kor, who dreamed of traveling through the galaxy. The two vow vengeance against the mother for causing Kor's death, as well as the death of Treize. The Herald reveals that Treize had a girlfriend in Ferrodin who was expecting a child, making the loss even more tragic for Yana. As a part of their plan against the mother, the Herald tells Yana that Marta, who the path looks up to, will become their guide, while Yana will play the role as their guardian. When Yana asks what role the Herald will play, he backs away. Yana goes to Marta's personal quarters to talk about the future of the path. Marta has changed her face paint to a fearsome design that goes over one eye as an expression of her new religious militancy. Yana wonders what she's gotten herself into and whether or not she'll live to see the end of it. A few days after that, Jedi Knight Ezranrel and his droid C9 have come to investigate the now abandoned path compound on Dalna. Aslan is there responding to an emergency request from Master Zo Laru to check on the well-being of Master Zala and Kevmo after they lost contact days earlier. Aslan, when we see him, has already searched the Master's shuttle and has spoken with the Sheriff and Lady Jara, who both blamed the Path of the Open Hand for the Jedi's disappearance. While searching the caverns below the compound, he finds the stone-like remains of both Kevmo and Master Zala. Aslan also discovers that their lightsabers are missing. Through the Force, he senses a disturbance that sends fear down his spine, and that is where the book ends. Now, I also said this in the TikTok that I made about this part of our journey, so forgive me for sounding a little bit like a broken record here. But I truly believe this is exactly what the opening of a phase for the High Republic should have been. My huge issue with specifically Into the Light, the first book of Phase 1, while I love that book so dearly and appreciate it for what it is, it felt a little bit like being thrown into the deep end of a pool when you don't know how to swim. There's so much information and so many characters and so many different concepts being thrown at you within that relatively short book, and it all just felt so overwhelming, especially for being the first thing you were supposed to read within this completely new series full of brand new concepts for the Star Wars canon when this was coming out in either 2019 or 2020 or 2021. Sorry, I don't know the exact date. This one, on the other hand, felt like you were using the steps into the shallow end of the pool. It felt like you were being eased in to this new situation. And while I don't want to sit here and pretend like the situations that these books were tasked with handling are at all similar, because Phase 1 was setting up the entirety of the project while Phase 2 was just setting up Phase 2, I do think that there are some things that this book did really well that could have aided the first book in Phase 1 a little bit if they could have looked forward in time. Like I mentioned at the top, this book is written by Justina Ireland and Tessa Gratton. Justina Ireland has written so much for the High Republic. I really do appreciate the work that they've done in this space. And as for Tessa Gratton, she's written some of my favorite Star Wars books, period, not to mention some of my favorite High Republic books. So the fact that they were able to come together and write this book, I think, really set it up for success and made it exactly what I personally look for in these books, which are an interesting plot that doesn't take too long to set up, interesting, well-grounded characters that have a fun dynamic between them, and something new that we haven't seen before. And while this wasn't necessarily a completely new concept, at the end of the day, it is a Jedi and a non-Jedi going on an adventure together, which is basically the entire plot of Star Wars. But I think that this book did a really good job of establishing the vibe of Phase 2, which is gentle at first, as it reaches around to stab you in the back. And that's part of the reason why I love this phase so much. It is so drastic and so heavy while also feeling like a warm hug. But at the end of the day, it is a tragedy, and all of your favorite characters aren't confirmed to make it out. And while we're here talking about my thoughts, I think it would only be right to establish some of my favorite characters at the moment. I think that it might be fun going forward to highlight a few characters within each section and talk about why I love them so much. And for this episode, I definitely want to talk about my beloved baby boy, Kevmo Zink. He's not here for a long time, but what we learn about Kevmo in this book, I think, is so endearing and silly and cute, and exactly what I think makes Padawans so interesting. Yes, they are Jedi, and yes, they have adopted the Jedi's way of life already, but it's only because that's the only thing they've ever known. It's very much like going and talking to an elementary schooler or a middle schooler. Up until that point in their life, the only thing they've ever done is school. So they maybe are a little bit rebellious, or they keep asking questions, or they're gonna be little stinkers. Because they don't have to deal with the hardships of adulthood and making their own decisions and things of that nature. And I think that Kevmo was written really well in that regard. He's still definitely a Jedi and doing his best to be as Jedi-like as he possibly can, but he can't help himself but flirt with everyone he comes in contact to and be a little bit too physical with people and just generally act like a teenager would. And I just think that that is so fun. Another character that I feel like I have to highlight in this moment is Marta Rowe. I genuinely love Marta so deeply, and knowing what's coming for her makes this even more tragic. But just in case you're listening to this and you haven't experienced the High Republic at all, I'm not going to speak any more on that. I will say though, Marta as a concept, and specifically her being Evereni, I think is really, really fun. We have this dichotomy of her being this really sweet, kind of gentle character who loves children and wants to be this kind of motherly influence on the people around her, but but at the same time, she is this species that has sharp teeth and sharp claws and is known to be very violent, and is, at the time that we know it, kind of hated in the galaxy, and there aren't a lot of them that we've seen. It's only her and Yana at this point. And I think that the, again, dichotomy between her being this really gentle character, but also her being this ferocious monster-like species is such a good trope. One last thing that I want to give this book flowers for is the length of it. And I know that this is so drastically surface level, but this is going to become a complaint from me later in this series, so I feel like we need to start pointing out the good examples when we have them. This book, in my opinion, is the perfect length. I want to be able to get through an audiobook in a day, and a day could be 7 hours, it could be 10 hours, it could be 12 hours if we're pushing it. I want to be able to sit down at the beginning of my workday and finish the audiobook that I'm listening to, either when I get home or when I am about to go to sleep. And that goal can usually be accomplished if the audiobook is under, let's say, generously 16 hours long. You divide 16 by 2, that's an 8-hour audiobook, and that is the perfect length for me. This audiobook on regular speed for regular people is, I believe, 8 hours and 20 minutes. Is that what I said at the top of this? I can't remember anymore. And on 2 times speed, because I'm a monster, that made it 4 hours, which was absolutely perfect. I had time to sit down and listen to it and pause it and take notes and then pause it and then go edit my notes and highlight things and go over to Wikipedia and use that to help guide my summary for the script for this video, and it just gave me so much more time to digest it. And I know that this is a little bit of me making my own problems. I could still take the time and do everything that I just mentioned with a longer book if I was willing to spend multiple days on it. And while I would say that I am willing to do that, I wouldn't say that I want to do that. If I can get through a book in a day, I will power through it no matter what I am leaving out to do that. And if that means I have to take all of my notes haphazardly and go back and do the summary and the script after I'm finished reading, I'll do that. But that's, again, completely a me thing. The last thing that we truly need to do here to wrap up our discussion of Path of Deceit is to give this a ranking. I've come to the conclusion that the best way to rank all of these things that we will be going through over the course of this year is to do this in a tier list style rather than a number grade out of 5 or out of 10. It just makes more sense in my mind that I would be able to look at something and kind of give it the same rating side by side on a tier list S through F rather than trying to give everything a concrete number. I can be a little bit more loosey-goosey, wish-washy with the tier list. I am very, very indecisive, and I feel like when I'm doing the tier list rather than the number system, I won't be as likely to go back and try to change numbers to fit what I'm thinking about 4 months from now. So for now, I think I'm going to give this a letter grade, and then at the end of our experience, we can go back and determine what's better than what's worse than what, if anything, needs to be moved around with hindsight. So, what letter grade do we give Path of Deceit? I adore this book. I loved it when I first read it. I think that it was one of my first 5-star reads when I read it last year, and that really did hold true. The only thing that I am hesitant about is whether this is an S tier for me or whether it is at the top of A tier, like an A+ if we end up breaking it up that much. And I'm not sure that I have an answer for that. My heart at this moment is saying that this is an S tier read, but thinking about stuff that I read last year, I know that there are things that I will like more than this, so I'm leaning towards maybe making this an A+. I think what we'll do at this moment is say that Path of Deceit is going to be at the top of our A tier for right now, and if at the end of the year I think that it deserves to be moved up to S, we can definitely make that adjustment. That's it. we've officially done it. I am so happy to finally be starting this journey after actual years of wanting to make this come to fruition. I am a little bit nervous and I am a little bit scared about whether or not we will actually be able to complete this goal and how long it's actually going to take. My womanly audacity is telling me that it is absolutely doable, but the other wolf inside of me is telling me that it is probably not, and this is going to be spilled over into 2027, which I'm not against. I feel like making media around the media that I consume is a way that I stay engaged with things, and so hopefully you guys enjoyed this and enjoyed this process as much as I do, because if you do, there is a lot to look forward to within this year, hopefully. If you made it all the way through this, thank you so much for listening. If you want to keep up with this journey when I am not updating through a vocal format, you can find me on Instagram at twin.sunns, that's SUNNS. You can also find me on TikTok with the same username. And of course, we will speak again very soon after having read our next book, Quest for the Hidden City, a middle grades book from the High Republic Phase 2 by George Mann. We've got a long way to go in this series, so remember, do or do not, there is no try.